everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So there's an interview with Bill Maher by this organization called Attn. Ultimately, it's just on the State of the Union. The first 100 days of Trump. We're in the age of Trump. What do you take on the Democrats? What do you take on the Republicans? What are your take on this country, this country's future? So it should be a pretty interesting interview. I saw the initial part of it. I haven't seen the entire all the way through, so we'll be watching some of this together. So let's take a look.
What grade would you give Donald Trump if you had to assign him a letter grade?
Of course an F. Because, like, even the things we thought might be good about Trump, like he's not beholden to any ideology. Yeah, but he turned out to just be a regular right-wing, down-the-line asshole. We cut your health care, corporations get blowjobs, whatever they want, right? Yeah. You know, I don't see anything that's the maverick Trump.
So you think this idea that he's going to shake up the system was just a lie?
Well, he certainly shook up Goldman Sachs because he took, like, most of their people and put them to head the government. So obviously they've proven they have no principles.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Now, I had no illusions about what Trump was going to do when he got into that office. None at all. None at all. He was running under the Republican banner. The man has said there was no such thing as climate change. He seemed outwardly hateful. He started his campaign saying that Mexicans were rapists and rapists and drug dealers, something to that effect, and that ultimately he thinks some of them are nice people. This is how he started the campaign. So I had no illusions about what was going to take place when he got in that office. I figured he's only ever looked out for himself. He's going to find ways to continue to look out for himself when he gets in that position. But that doesn't mean I didn't have hopes. I did have hopes. I honestly had serious hopes. Because I thought those people belittled him, like the media, even the Republicans. They thought he had no chance at all. Yes, he ended up alpha mailing all of them. Fair enough. But ultimately, they talked to him in this kind of a smug way. This assumption that this guy doesn't supposed to be here. This guy doesn't supposed to be here. Now, my feeling was because of that, he may be able to create a luft between himself and the party, meaning that he has enough leeway to tack a little bit to the left. That's what I thought. Now, when he's saying healthcare, everybody's going to have healthcare. Well, that's pretty specific. If he's saying, yes, $10 minimum wage, again, that's pretty specific. So my hope was, okay, maybe he's going to move a little bit to the left. Because if he moves a little bit to the left, he can own the White House. The public will look at him and see him as being above party politics. It's not true. He's still going to be passing some right-wing policies and those tax cuts and everything else. But the fact that he's throwing bones to the left, and not just throwing bones to the left, doing so on things that Republicans hated and swore allegiance to be against, it would literally give him a certain amount of credibility as being above it all. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. If you were looking for just pure political opportunism of keeping yourself in office and keeping yourself in power, that would have been the way to do it. Let's keep going.
Real time, you've unveiled a lot of hypocrisies from the Trump administration, from Republicans.
That's the great thing about having tiny hands. It's easier to pull stuff right out of your ass. You know?
What, in your opinion, is the worst or the most egregious hypocrisy?
Well, probably the little guy thing, because that's what he ran on, you know, at his convention speech.
I am your voice.
But the great hope, I think, is that that little man will find out that they elected a con man. He's maybe the best one ever.
Nobody's a better con man.
Nobody is a better con. No, that's maybe the one thing that he could actually make that brag about. He literally talked his way into the White House, like a guy who isn't on the list talks his way into a nightclub. He went up to the bouncer, that is the American people, and I know I'm not on the list, but let me tell you, I can be amazing in this club. You know, and he had like 4 guys with him. You know, it was just, he was not supposed to get in that club, but he did it. And I know a lot of them would say, well, yes, but if he delivers even half. That's not how con men work. They don't deliver half. They deliver nothing, and then they move on to the next town, or in his case, the next lie. And that's part of his con man genius. He's got so much shit going on. It's like being in a swarm of bees. You know, you can't follow all the lies and the bullshit. They know that that car you bought, the used car salesman knows it's going to break down 20 miles down the road. But that's tomorrow's problem, to be solved with tomorrow's lie. And that's who he is.
Yeah, I agree with that one too. I think the worst of the hypocrisies was essentially taking advantage of people who needed a change, if that makes sense. It's like if somebody had cancer and they go see a witch doctor, and the witch doctor says, yes, I can fix you, but it's going to cost you $10,000 to fix you. Under normal circumstances, that person is not going to a witch doctor. And if there were other scenarios, other avenues, they would go those other avenues. By virtue of the desperation of the individual, the seriousness of the condition itself, or at the very least their perceived seriousness of the situation, hope springs eternal. And they're going to give that guy that money, even though that guy is absolutely about to swindle them. The point I'm making is the swindle works because the witch doctor is using the desperation of the person to essentially as leverage to get that person to take that bet or bite on that particular bait. I'm making this case that this is similar to Trump, which is why I think this is probably the worst thing. I mean, a guy who's a TV show billionaire, I mean, he's a reality show host, ultimately went through one business deal after another, screwing over people who were stupid enough to invest money with him. It was one failing after the next. He gets on stage and screams into a mic that I am your voice. I am the voice of the downtrodden, the poor, the worker, the people who are having a hard way to go in society. I am your voice. I am Donald Trump. I am a billionaire. I'm your voice. Now, that's absurd on its face. And I could see that. Like, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. It's like the billionaire, the blue-collar billionaire. That makes no sense. And yet, those people looked at him and says, this guy's different. This guy's different. Because he was different. Different doesn't necessarily mean better. It just means different. You had somebody in 2008 that hit that nail on the head with hope and change. I am hope and change. I'm going to fundamentally change how Washington is run. There was immense hopes. There was very little change. But my point is, that message resonated. But why do you think that message resonated? Like, it's not a situation where everything is just hunky-dory. No. People are hurting in this particular society. You have half the country is in debt. Wages haven't gone anywhere. The main jobs in this country are service jobs. Even 95% of the jobs that came back after the recovery were part-time or contract. This country is hurting. People are working multiple jobs. There are massive amounts of debt. You had one candidate who represented the establishment, essentially the status quo that led them to the situation to which they found themselves. You have the other candidate, who's a wild card. He looks nothing like any other politicians. He's nothing like the politicians who've lied to them repeatedly, over and over again for year after year after year. He's different, in the same way that the prior president was different. The continuity between these two things is this need for change. Trump is a showman. He understood that. He caught on to that pretty quick. Now, the problem with that is, he's a right-winger, like a full-on right-winger. He's leveraging what their needs are. He's essentially leveraging their needs for his own ends. He's running a con. So yeah, I think the fact that he's running that con, and the reason that con works is because those people are hurting, and they're looking for something different. They're looking for something different than the other people who've been in that office and who ignored them, lied to them, essentially did not work at their behest. They were hoping that he would. It was hope. They hope wrong. They hope wrong. I agree with Bill Maher. That's the worst.
You think Donald Trump will be impeached?
Well, I don't know. It depends really probably how the 2018 election goes, because if Democrats can't pull out that election after they're supposedly woken up and we have our own Tea Party and all this stuff and we're in the streets and we have pussy hats and, you know, the whole thing is going on. I mean, if Democrats controlled these intelligence committees, yes, then absolutely he could be impeached. But as it is now, you know, the Republicans, they're pretty amazing the way they are party over country.
Which,
yeah, this is where we part ways. This is where we part ways. I do not agree with that at all. I agree that Republicans do party over the public. Democrats also do party over public. Look, I had to go at Bill Maher in one of the other segments. I think it was about a month ago. Because I was pointing out this hypocrisy where it's a Rachel Maddow effect. I'm only going to look at one side, and I'm going to castigate that one specific side. Now, if you didn't know any better, and you were watching that show, and the only thing you saw me do was going balls out after one side, implicitly it makes this other side look better. Mind you, that other side that you're not paying attention to is not the object of your scorn. When you're talking about this other side, you're talking about them with a particular fondness. So right off the bat, even though you may not vocally say it's all one side, the tenor of the show, the context of the show, or even you can even say metadata in that sense of the show, gets that point across extremely well. The point doesn't have to be spoken to be understood. The case I'm making is that Bill Maher does similar stuff. The way he focuses on one very specific side, giving this other side a pass for similar behavior. Tell me, joke man, what happened in the primaries? What happened in the primaries? So you had Hillary Clinton play up what was called a Pied Piper candidate. Now you guys have called this guy everything but a child of God. You've called him the goddamn apocalypse. She played up that apocalypse. It was only going to be two people running that race. The fact that Trump had any chance at all to be president is terrifying. And yet, the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, did that purely for political ends. It had nothing to do with the country. She made the assumption that he would be the easiest, if not the only, candidate she had a chance of beating. But she's held to probability at this point. What I mean is there's a statistical chance that Trump can become president, and not a bad one. Which means she's putting this country in line of a bullet for her own political aspirations. Now, keep going with that. Because right off the bat, that's literally party before country. To compound that, in the primaries when she was running against Sanders, she cheated the strongest candidate. By any metric that you look at in those primaries, Sanders was the strongest candidate. He had more momentum, he had more drive and more energy. He was bringing in more money, which is amazing because he wasn't getting high-ticket donors. There was clearly an energy about him. People clearly loved what he was saying. If the contest was fair, she likely would have lost. What I mean is, throwing 100,000 people off the roads in Brooklyn, stealing Nevada outright, shutting down polling locations, people's voter IDs just mysteriously disappearing. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not on the rolls. We don't know what happened. Or even having your party affiliation all of a sudden just change. These closed primaries excluded millions of people who wanted to vote for Sanders. They just couldn't do it. The party itself was excluding people in that way. This kind of soft voter suppression. I would make the case that kicking people off the rolls and dropping party affiliations is not just soft. I'm talking about, in regards to soft, I just mean we're having a closed primary. The only people who can vote were people who were part of the party and who knew about this months and months and months in advance. Not to mention the news stories attacking Sanders, the things that Deborah Wasserman-Schultz in Brazil was doing behind the scenes, taking a guy's email list. It was one thing after another. It was just a sleazy election. Again, all metrics showed that Sanders was the strongest candidate. The DNC already had the apparatus, superdelegates, that could come in a pinch and say, all right, we need to give this to the strongest candidate because we want our candidate to win. The point is to derive who's the strongest candidate. That's not what happened. The Democratic Party said, it's her turn. We don't care what the public wants. It's her turn. I've made this argument before. When Obama got Hillary's support for that contest, if you remember, they had this thing called Pumas, Party Unity My Ass. Essentially, it's Hillary's turn. I'm not voting for Obama. Hillary came out and vouched for Obama and said, essentially, I'm supporting this guy. He made her Secretary of State. Now, I've always made the contention that the reason he made her Secretary of State is because for her support, she knew she was going to run in 2016. Meaning he was going to give her a springboard to run in 2016. We don't care what you want. It's her turn. Over and over again, that was the narrative. It's her turn. She didn't care what the public wanted. The party did not care what the public wanted. It was Hillary's turn. And Hillary lost because of that. What I'm getting at is the DNC could have did something different. Oh, hell, even if they just didn't cheat Sanders, they could have did something different. Their behavior, the things that they did, was for party. It had nothing at all to do with the country or the greater good. They didn't care about the greater good. I'm making this point that Bill Maher is like, yeah, that party, party before people. Yeah, dude, your party is like that too. Your party is like that too. Let's not pretend that all of this is on them. The people who you yourself are affiliated with function in the same way as recently as 6 months ago.
Science, because Trump's budget slashes the EPA.
Can we really just put a guy in the head of the EPA who doesn't believe in the EPA? I mean, that's a bridge too far. Even Bush wouldn't do something like that. No, absolutely you can. And if we don't believe in climate change, then why should we fund anything about it? And of course, the drooling idiots who vote for him, they don't generally believe in it either, or they don't care. It's not immediate. You can see a wall. Big, beautiful wall. You know what else you can see? Cruise missiles firing off a warship at night. It's beautiful. These fucking newscasters were like coming over this when it was going on the other day.
I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons.
These things you can see. What you can't see is climate change. Even a giant event, a flood, a storm or something, they happened before. So it's very easy for people to go, oh, come on, that's just the weather.
I know you real Americans hate being called stupid, but you gotta meet me halfway and stop being stupid.
You can't link one event to climate change the same way you don't know which Cheeto you ate gave you cancer. Somewhere along the line you ate so much shit that the toxicity could not be handled by your body and you got cancer. But you don't know which one it was.
Democrat.
All right, so I agree and disagree. I'm uncomfortable with calling them stupid just because they disagree with the climate change thing. Yes, I agree with it. Yes, I've been on here. I wouldn't necessarily say losing my shit about it, but it's an important issue. But you're not going to get those people on your side calling them idiots. That's the first point. The second point, I agree with them that because it's somewhat amorphous, like it's almost conceptual at this point. Yes, you've seen a flood. Yes, you've seen an earthquake. You see all these other natural disasters. But this full well depends upon research and data, not necessarily something you can tangibly touch. So those people are going to have to trust somebody else in order to believe in this particular thing. Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I don't necessarily think that's a horrible analysis, but it doesn't go far enough. There's more to that. From a logical perspective, just purely logical. Let's say you had 10 tasks to accomplish. How do you make the determination on how to get through those 10 tasks? Now, ultimately, you would usually rank those things in degree of priority. What are my priorities? What's first? What's second? What's something that's fast I can get through? What's something that maybe a more weightier or heavier for me to get through? And you set your list accordingly. Now, I've made this point before. The richest country on the planet, half of the country is in massive amounts of debt. Or not even just massive amounts of debt. Also, poverty. Literally, poverty. 66% of the country, if there was like a $500 car note, they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford it. Wages, for the most part, are stagnant or have gone down. Real wages. Productivity has spiked. But you have people working all of these jobs where they're expensive, booming. People are under stress. People are under stress. I mean, even people who are maybe in a middle-class lifestyle, that position is not secure. That's stressful. That's stressful. You know, you have situations of like, how am I going to get my kids clothing for school? How am I going to pay for that field trip? How am I going to make sure they have lunch? How am I going to get my own medication? All these things that circle around an individual. Now, those people, for the most part, their needs aren't being met, at least in the sense of a life of fulfillment. It's a life of responsibility and a life of difficulty. Half the jobs, more than half actually, are service jobs. Of all the jobs that came back after the crash, 95% were part-time or contract. You have literally an economy that's running off of service jobs, low-wage jobs. So the point I'm getting at is these people, for the most part, are looking at their environment and they're saying, I have too much shit to deal with than to deal with this climate change thing that's 50 years off. And now, if those people's needs were met, say for instance, there was a basic, universal basic income, then yeah, the pressure is off. That particular person knows for the most part they're going to eat. They know they're going to get their meds. They know the basic necessities of life are resolved. Yes, they can think about weightier issues at that point. But if you're talking about a situation where people are just struggling to make ends meet, and they have all of these responsibilities, just from a sense of priority, of importance, yeah, climate change is not going to be the first thing on that list. It's going to probably be down further on that list. If you want to change that, and if you want those people to be a little bit more incentivized or prioritized to have wider ideas, because like anything else, your perspective focuses to the thing that's most important to you. In this particular case, we run off of a capitalistic society. Everybody's trying to maximize profits. Everybody's trying to avoid scarcity, avoid lack, and not have it. So right off the bat, just the basis of the society itself, like I said, particularly when you get into this idea of poverty and this idea of just barely making ends meet, it demands a certain narrowing of focus to accomplish survival aims. To widen the gaze, to say, well, wait a minute, there is a wider reality, and part of that wider reality is climate change. No, I can't see it. No, I can't touch it. But the data is pretty clear that that's what's taking place. Calling them stupid is not going to get you there. Because technically, I don't think they're stupid at that point. I think those people are just functioning in a normal way. You may disagree with it, but you don't have their pressures. You're a joke man. You're making millions of dollars. You're perfectly okay. You're not in a situation where you're in any kind of scarcity or lack. You can have those big concepts. And don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that just because you're in scarcity or just because you don't have, you're not necessarily thinking that way. I'm making a point that it is a hell of a lot easier to think that way, to think about wider, expansive things, when you don't necessarily need your focus narrowed for basic survival. That's what I'm getting at. I believe in climate change. I think it's damn important. And in fact, I think it's a win-win. Even if it's proven to be wrong, so what? You're making your environment better. You're getting new jobs from clean energy and whatnot. I want clean air and clean water. Those are things I want. So even if it's proven to be wrong, I still get my clean air and my clean water, and I have a better living environment that's going to be more healthy. I do believe it. But in their case, they're probably apathetic, but that apathy is just based off the desperation of the moment. Or at the very least, it's based off of them only really concerning themselves with the immediacy of their lives. Universal basic income. If you want those people to get more engaged in the political process and pay more attention to what's taking place, that will be one of the means to do it. That would definitely be one of the means. You need to release the pressure valve. If you release the valve, or at the very least release some of that pressure that's focused on survival, they will listen to stuff like this. They will. You just have to deal with their first needs.